Welcome to In the Loop on County Cable Montgomery. I'm Neil Greenberger. And on this edition, our very special guest is County Councilmember Cherri Branson. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Everybody brings a unique perspective to the County Council, but I think in your case, you really bring a unique perspective that very few of our guests have ever had. And the fact that in December of 2013, when Councilmember Valerie Irvin announced that she would be leaving her term early, and it was a pretty big competition to see who would replace her, and the council appointed somebody. You had a pretty great job already. What made you decide to pursue this?
I wanted to just try it. After being a staffer for so many years, I thought it might be fun to be a member. But I think more importantly, at least for me, is I wanted to be someplace where I thought I could get something done. The gridlock and the partisanship on Capitol Hill made getting something done very difficult. And so I really needed to sort of stretch my wings and try to do something different, and to try to bring something to the county that, I could offer my service.
You were on Capitol Hill for over 20 years in many different positions. I think a lot of staffers often think that they do the work, and I think in the case they often do, but the fact is that no matter whether it's Congress or a local jurisdiction, the people at the dais get to raise their hands. You've been at it now for quite a while, and you look pretty comfortable. I'm not sure if you are, but you sure look comfortable up there. What's the difference of being the person who does all the work and knows everything, and the person who sits up there, knows a lot, but gets to raise their hand?
The difference is, I'm not sure there is a huge difference. I mean, being a staffer, it can be very frustrating. You want the member to do and say things, but you know that that person's got to run for election. And nobody votes for you as a staffer. And so you want things done, but sometimes you have to accept that it just can't happen that way. When you're on the dais, you have to make your own political decisions. You have to figure out what's good for you and what's not, and most importantly, you have to figure out when you're going to do what you genuinely believe is the best thing for your constituents, and nobody gets to make that decision but you.
Well, we're going to talk about some of the issues that you've really taken prominence with very quickly, but your background to me is pretty fascinating. When the lyrics come from sea to shining sea, and it comes to the number of people you work for on Capitol Hill, you've worked for people all across, who represent people all across this country, New York, Mississippi, West Coast. What does that bring to you when you're a Silver Spring resident? You represent the people of District 5, and you have many views, but not pretty focused views.
Well, District 5 is very diverse. And so some of the things I learned on Capitol Hill about representing diverse constituencies have really played well in understanding this district. As you say, I've worked for members who represented Mississippi, Hawaii, Detroit, New York, California, Chicago. So, I've gotten a real good sense of what's important to the people of this country in every part of this country. And I think what I understood and what I continue to understand the most is that people generally want a few things. They want things to be fair. They want the government to use their resources wisely, and they want to feel as though they're not being taken for granted. And that's true whether it's Hawaii or Mississippi or District 5 in Silver Spring.
Well, those are very evident things. One more thing I did want to ask you about your background. I found pretty fascinating. You were the chief legal counsel for the Homeland Security Commission. During quite a time in our country's history, started about 2005, I believe.
Right.
What was that like, just a few years after September 11, 2001, things changing, the attitude in the whole nation, in the world, changing on security, and I think you probably heard and were involved in quite a few interesting things during that.
I definitely was. You know, my time on Capitol Hill involved also, well, as on the Homeland Security Committee, I was Chief Oversight Counsel. So what I got to do essentially was to look at the programs and policies of the Department of Homeland Security, how they affected security in this nation, whether or not we were just doing security theater or we were actually doing things that helped maintain the safety, security of this nation, and also the privacy and civil liberties of the people of this country. So, you know, I tell people all the time that working on Homeland Security, I had to get up every day and read a couple of different papers to figure out what I'd be working on, you know, because I didn't know if there would be a terrorist attack somewhere in the world, a wildfire, a flood. You know, it was all those things go into Homeland Security. It's also, you know, it's everything from FEMA to TSA to, you know, how your phones are being intercepted. I mean, it is everything. But before I got there, I also worked on another committee, which was government oversight. And that taught me a lot about big picture government and oversight of various departments and agencies. So it wasn't a sharp turn to go to Homeland Security and look at just one department, but it was an important turn, not only because of the work the Homeland Security Committee does, but because of the work the Homeland Security Department is charged with doing. And the fact that at the time I got there, the Homeland Security Department was only 2 years old. And so as a very new department and the largest department that had been stood up since World War II, I mean, this was a department that essentially became and actually kind of started off as sort of the third largest department in the federal government. And so the practices that it maintained during its standing up and its operation would become the practices that would flow throughout its existence. And so luckily, I was on the ground floor in trying to reform some of the practices that maybe weren't the best in the world.
Well, let's go from worldwide to your experience in Silver Spring. You've lived there over 25 years. When you decided to join the council, what are some of the things you really wanted to home in about Silver Spring being really the basis of District 5? Anything concerned you? Did you say, boy, no, I really want to turn my attention to those things?
Well, you know, I didn't come to the council really with an agenda. I mean, I came because I wanted to provide effective representation for the people of that district. I felt that they had a good history of effective representation, and I wanted to continue that. As I've gotten on the council, I mean, there are some things that I think are very important to the people of Silver Spring and to the people of that district that I believe have to be taken seriously, that one has to work very hard to get things done, because even in the short time I have here, if nothing else, I might not be able to get everything done, but I can at least help provide a path for whoever my successor is and to lay some markers for whoever my successor may be.
One of those markers is a big looming one. It's the Silver Spring Transit Center, which you'll probably be out of office and it still will not be open. Without going into all the specifics of who was right and wrong, what has that meant to Silver Spring, the fact that it's been out there, incomplete, people see it, for many people we hear over and over, it's disruptive to their lives, whether they just have to walk an extra 2 blocks around it. Has it been a great impact? Is this just something that needs to be finished and corrected?
It definitely needs to be finished. I mean, but it doesn't need to be open until it's totally safe. You know, nobody wants concrete fallen on anybody's head, okay? So there has to be, the people deserve some safety and knowing that everything possible has been done to make sure that that center is going to serve its purpose, is going to be there, and is that they can use it without worrying. But you're right, there's been an enormous disruption of regular people's lives, from where you get the bus to how you commute every day. That's been a huge disruption. And in the final analysis, I understand that people want that center to be completed. I get that. But I don't think anybody wants that center to open until they know that this is someplace they can be, and they can be safely without worrying about anything bad happening.
Well, in that same vein of just paying attention to all details, you were assigned to the Education Committee of the County Council. I know you were very involved in your son's education all along. How should people feel about the state of education in Montgomery County right now, especially since you've had this new view for a few months of maybe seeing it a little differently? I'm not sure, but are we in a good shape? Should people worry? Should people feel good about where we are now?
I think people should always be concerned about educating our children. I'm not sure they should be worried, but they shouldn't feel as if everything is all right. We still have an achievement gap in this county that affects African American and Latino students. We still have a suspension gap that adversely affects African American and Latino students. So there's still a lot of work to do. There is no doubt that Montgomery County public schools are the crown jewel of Maryland's public schools. There is absolutely no doubt about that. However, that jewel has some cracks, and we have to figure out how to eliminate those cracks so that these schools serve every child and every parent can rest assured that their child will be treated fairly, will be educated properly, and will be given the best foot forward in it for the next rest of their lives, because education is a lifelong thing, and unless you have a firm foundation, you're not going to make it.
Well, I think we had too many things to talk about today. We're running out of time, but there's one thing in talking about the future I did want to ask you about, and that's the plans for White Oak along Route 29, the Science Gateway Center. That's in the next few years is what the council will be addressing, will be the growth area of this county. What do you think Route 29 and White Oak is going to look like in maybe 10 years?
I don't know, but I can tell you what I hope. What I hope is that White Oak will fulfill its potential in being a place of jobs and economic opportunity. What I hope is that the citizens, the residents of East County will finally get their due in creating places in their neighborhood where they can go to eat, shop, and most importantly, where they can have a firm economic foundation. White Oak has been under an unofficial moratorium for well over 20 years, and it's time for that to be lifted. It's time for the people in that community to be able to bring about the promise that they gained when they decided to move there. You know, they sort of made a bargain with this county. We're going to go out there where there's nothing, and we hope you'll put something. Well, it's time for the county to live up to the put something part of it.
I think you would agree that in the next few years, White Oak will be the talk of this county.
I hope in a good way.
Well, we are out of time. We have a lot to talk about. I hope you will join us again. Our special guest today on In the Loop has been Councilmember Cherri Branson. I'm Neil Greenberger. Please join us again on In the Loop on County Cable Montgomery.